Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah. How are you, dear students? We have a new day and a new unit to start with. Now we are going to start with our unit, which is Unit 2. Now before we start, just to remind you that we talked about stories of success in Unit 1. Now these stories were about teams who accomplished famous things and they worked together. Of course, we have big teams, small teams, and symbiotic teams. They were our discussion in the last unit. Now we are going to focus on one person instead of a team. We are going to talk about famous people who are influential people in our unit, which is Unit 2. Now we are going to start with the first lesson, which is the listen and discuss. We have the objectives of our lesson are going to be to give the meaning of new vocabulary, enumerate the importance of hard work to succeed, recall famous figures who had succeeded in changing their lives, select words and information points which summarize the figures' short biographies, and differentiate between being selfishly successful and being helpful. We are going to start with our lesson. We have influential people is our title. So first of all, there is a question for you. We have, what does the word influential mean? So before we start with the topic, do you know what the meaning of or what does the word influential mean? Now, we have influential comes from the word influence. Someone or something that is influential has a lot of influence over people or events, and we know that there are influencers all over the world who are famous for their achievements and things that they have done. Do you know any famous figures? Now, these influencers or influential people, they are usually famous people, of course not always, but mainly they are famous figures who have achieved a lot. So we're going to start with our lesson on page number 20. From the very start, talk about a person who went from not having much money to being wealthy. Now, a lot of these people who are influential people, they started by being not rich, or we can say poor, and then they became wealthy. Of course, they became wealthy, rich, and the most important, they are wealthy with their knowledge and the achievements they have progressed. There is a question also on page number 20. We have the question, what qualities do you think a person needs to excel in life and be successful? Now, of course, a successful person, he or she must have qualities. These qualities, what do you think they are? And we have the most important, the word excel. Do you know the meaning of the word excel? Now, excel is going to be one of the words that we are going to study in our vocabulary part in the lesson. Now, before we start with our discussion, we are going to just pass by the vocabulary. Now, we have the words excel, reputation, impoverished, prominent, and philanthropist. Now, I have some words prepared for you. These words, you can just relate if you can or you already know some of these words. We have the word poor, we have benefactor, popular, we have notable, and also we have the word excellent. Now, sometimes you can just relate between the words from their form. Sometimes you know them. You can also see that some are close. So I can give you a very obvious hint here. We have the word excellent is related or connected to the word excel. So one is an adjective and one is a verb. Now we are going to read the texts about famous figures on page number 20. You can see from what I have prepared here that there are 4 figures. Who are they? We are going to start reading about these figures and knowing why are they influential and why are they famous. Also, what is special about their short biographies? So we now know that we are going to talk about 4 figures. Now these 4 figures in the book, they have short biographies about them. We are going to read them together. Now, I have also here a graph prepared for you. So here, number one, the first step is going to see or highlight what are the things that I want you to read or concentrate on in the paragraphs. So we have the first graph, of course, the name of the personality. We have the type of industry and the country of citizenship. Where is this person from? We have the rags, which is the poor part of his or her life. So you are going to discover what is the personality and how did they start. Did they have a rich start, or did they start from the very beginning and they were in a less fortunate state? We have also the riches, which is, of course, I mean the part that they have achieved and accomplished and they are wealthy. And we have the last part, which is his or her reputation. So as I said, you are going to read and discover who is the personality. Now, when we finish from this part, of course, I'm going to put a countdown for you so you can have your time and just highlight. Now you know what I want you to concentrate on. And we have the second part. You are going to listen carefully and fill the graph with the information. So if you do not catch from the scanning at the very beginning, you are going to listen to the same part and you are going to just fill in the graph, and also you are going to answer the questions. What questions? We have here the questions that we have in or on page number 21. The discussion questions, or we have the comprehension here. You have 6 questions. Let's just read them together. We have the first one. Why was Zara successful? Number 2, why was Abdulatif Jamil named Saudi Volunteer of the Year? Number 3, how was Abdulatif Jamil contributed to the Saudization program in Saudi Arabia? Number 4, what challenges did Li Ka-shing face early in life? Number 5, what did Stephen Jobs do in his teens that demonstrated his determination and entrepreneurial skills and foresight? We have number 6, which event, in your view, must have given Jobs a great sense of satisfaction and self-worth? Now, from the questions here, you can see that there are some characters who are mentioned, which makes it a little bit easier, and now you have your hint. Now we're going to start. We have the first character, character number 1. So as I said, I'm going to start with a countdown, and you're going to just highlight the basic information. Starting. We have the name of the person. We are about to finish your time, yes, and we're done. Okay, so we have here, let's start. What are the basic information that I want from you? First of all, we have the industry. You can find that we have this person, he was in retail clothing, and his country of citizenship, or he is from Spain. Another interesting thing to know that we are talking about Amancio Ortega. Now, Amancio Ortega here, he was the founder and chairman of a company that owns many stores, including the enormously popular international clothing store, Zara. Now, this is something interesting about him. We have also, he was the son. When I mentioned that I want the rags part, what did he do when he was poor? He was the son of a railroad worker and had no formal higher education. Now you can see that we have here interesting information about Ortega. Now it's your turn to listen. The same paragraph.
Amancio Ortega is the founder and chairman of a company that owns many stores, including the enormously popular international clothing store, Zara. Now Spain's richest man, Ortega is the son of a railroad worker, and had no formal higher education. When Ortega was 13, he worked as a delivery boy for a shirt maker and later became the manager of a clothing store.
Okay, now here we have the second part we're going to complete.
He began making clothing in his living room and selling it to local stores. Ortega had an ability to predict what styles were going to be popular and to create these styles with inexpensive materials. In 1975, Ortega opened his first Zara store. Zara gained a reputation for selling designer fashions at reasonable prices. Today, Ortega's company has more than 4,000 stores in 71 countries.
Now we have a question. This was the first question in the discussion. We have the comprehension questions. We have here, why was Zara successful? You can find the answer here. We have the answer. He opened his first Zara store. Zara gained a reputation for selling designer fashions at reasonable prices. So we have here, we can say that we are talking about MNC Ortega. As we mentioned, he is a retail clothing. He is from Spain. And what did you discover about his personality? Now, I gave you hints. We have the first one, actually, we did them together. I told you that he was a delivery boy. Then he became a manager, and then he started in making clothing. After that, the successful part we have here, he opened his first store. More than 4,000 stores. So this is interesting to know that he has now. Now he started as a delivery boy, and then he has more than 4,000 stores. And he is known on an international level. Now what is known, or what is he known, mainly his character, his reputation, what is he known for? Now we have here two parts. We have here his ability to predict styles, as we mentioned in the question, and we have here sells designer fashions at reasonable prices. Now moving on, now you have the idea or what you are going to do. So we're going to start with the second personality or the character. We have number 2. Also, countdown. You have your time, the same thing. You're going to look. Eight, 7, 6, 3, 2, and 1. Now, we have here the basic thing that we want, or we can recognize here, that we are talking about a Saudi figure who is Mohammed Abdul Latif Jamil. Now, of course, he is from Saudi Arabia and his industry is in business. Now, something also interesting to know that he is a great philanthropist and a prominent businessman. He is the president of the ALJ, which is the Abdul Latif Jamil Company, which runs one of the world's largest car dealerships. He is a leading figure in corporate social responsibility. He has created a series of initiatives against poverty and has contributed greatly to the government Saudization program in the kingdom. And actually, this is the most basic part here and the interesting thing that we want to know about him. Now, before we start with the listening, I'd like to just give you a hint here that this personality, he was wealthy from the very start. So you're going to see what are his contributions. Now we have here, listen.
A great philanthropist and prominent businessman, Mohammed Abdul Latif Jamil, president of ALJ, runs one of the world's largest car dealerships, with operations in the Middle East, UK, Central Asia and China. A leading figure in corporate social responsibility, he has created a series of initiatives against poverty and has contributed greatly to the government's Saudization program in the kingdom, by promoting thousands of jobs every year through the ALJ community services programs.
Okay. We have a question here. How has Abdul Latif Jamil contributed to the Saudization program in Saudi Arabia? We have here, as I just read, that we have here he contributed through the Saudization program for promoting thousands of jobs. The second paragraph, or the second part.
Abdul Latif Jamil is an MIT alumnus, member of the Board of Trustees and dedicated supporter of the Abdul Latif Jamil Poverty Action Lab, JPAL. He has been named Saudi Volunteer of the Year for 2012, in recognition of the services offered by LISI in Saudi Arabia and the rest of the Arab world.
So what do we have here? We have also the third question, the comprehension part. We have here, why was Abdul Latif Jamil named Saudi Volunteer of the Year? You can see that he has been named Saudi Volunteer of the Year for 2012 in recognition of his services offered by the ALJCI in Saudi Arabia and the rest of the world. Moving on, we have our graph here. Now we are talking about Muhammad Abdul Latif Jamil. We have here, he is in business, he is from Saudi Arabia. Now we can say here, as I mentioned, that there are no rags. So we have here, what are his achievements? He created a series of initiatives against poverty, and we know that he contributed to the government's program. And also, he promoted thousands of jobs every year. So you can see that these points are connected. Now, as his reputation, we know about him to be a philanthropist, also a prominent businessman, and we have here, he is a leading figure. This hadith, we're going to read the hadith together. We have here, عن أبي هريرة عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال ليس الغنى عن كثرة العرض لكن الغنى غنى النفس. Now, what do we understand here? We understand that a person doesn't have to be wealthy by money or to be called wealthy, but we have here some self-worth here and his the beliefs that he follows that makes him really wealthy. Now moving on to our third personality, we have the third person. You can see that we have here an unusual name here. So the name, we're going to start. You have your timer. Okay, time's up. Now we have here, what do we know about this personality? First of all, we have his name, Li Ka-shing. Now you can guess where is this personality from, which is from China, and also he is in the business industry. Now also we have here something interesting to know, that at this company, Li used to assemble plastic flowers. So just think about plastic flowers and remember Li Ka-shing. Now we are going to start with the listening part. Of course, before we have here, he was born into an impoverished family. Now when you say the word impoverished, can you relate with one of the words that I showed you at the very beginning? We have impoverished. They don't have money. They are not wealthy. So just put that in mind. We have here also, he was forced to leave high school so that he could work to support his family because they were impoverished. Now we're going to start with the listening part.
Li was born into an impoverished family in China in 1928. When he was 15, his father died, forcing Li to leave high school so that he could work to support his family. He took a job in a plastics company, where he would work 16 hours a day. At this company, Li used to assemble plastic flowers.
Okay. Yes, now we do have a question here. Now, one of the comprehension questions was, what challenges did Li Ka-shing face early in life? Now, there were challenges. We can say that, as we mentioned, he was born in an impoverished family. He had to leave school and support his family. He took a job in a plastics company where he would work 16 hours a day. You have the second part?
By 1950, Li had started his own plastics manufacturing company. His company prospered, which led Li to expand his business into many different fields. However, his successes are not all monetary. Li Ka-shing has a reputation for being honest and generous. In fact, he is one of Asia's most prominent philanthropists, and has announced plans to donate 1/3 of his wealth to charity.
Okay. Now, what do we know about this personality? First of all, we have here his name, Li Ka-shing. We have here he was in the business industry. He was from China, as we mentioned. Now, as Rags, we know that he left school. He supported his family. And we have here, he had a job in plastics company. And he started his own company, which is the start of the wealthy state that he lived after that. We have here, he had a company, prospered, and business expanded. Now, his reputation, he is known to be honest, he is known also to be generous, and he was a prominent philanthropist. Now, moving on, we have our fourth and last personality here. We have here the famous Stephen Paul Jobs. Now, you can see from the date that this person is not alive, so we have here also, we're going to just know about his history. Starting, now you have your time. And time's up. So we have here, yes, now we are talking about Stephen Paul Jobs. He was in computer design, as we know, and we have here his country of citizenship is the US. Now, something interesting to know that he co-founded actually Apple with Steve Wozniak and proceeded to develop and market the first successful lines of personal computers. Now, as his history, we know that he was adopted, and also he was adopted in a working class family. He grew up to be, he dropped out of college because he could not afford to pay his tuition. Now you are going to listen again.
Stephen Paul Jobs was born in 1955 and adopted into a working-class family. He grew up in what later became Silicon Valley. He dropped out of college because he could not afford to pay his tuition. In the late 70s, he co-founded Apple with Steve Wozniak and others, and proceeded to develop and market the first successful lines of personal computers.
As we mentioned, now we have the question, what did Stephen Jobs do in his teens that demonstrated his determination, entrepreneurial skills, and foresight? Now you can see that the answer, he dropped out of college because he could not afford to pay his tuition, so he was too poor. In the late 70s, he co-founded Apple, as we said, with Steve Wozniak and others, and proceeded to develop the market of the first successful line of personal computers. The second and the last part.
He eventually resigned from Apple over an argument with the board of directors in 1984, and founded Next. Apple's buyout of Next, in 1997, brought Jobs back to Apple as its CEO. He was the largest individual shareholder of the Walt Disney Company and a member of the board. Jobs was admired by many for his entrepreneurial skills, his foresight, and his ability to create and support products that were both functional and aesthetically pleasing.
Okay, now we have here the last question. Which event, in your view, must have given Jobs a great sense of satisfaction and self-worth? We can see that we have the answer. Now, he eventually resigned from Apple over an argument with the board of directors in 1984 and founded Next. Apple's buyout of Next in 1997 brought Jobs back to Apple as its CEO. Now, just imagine that he had this argument and he came back as the CEO. So this is something interesting to know about Stephen Jobs. Now, the last graph that we have here, of course, we're talking about Stephen Paul Jobs. He is, or he was in computer design. He was from the US. We now know that he was from a working class family, couldn't pay tuition, so he couldn't complete college, and he dropped out of college. After that, as a success form, we have here he co-founded Apple, developed and marketed personal computers, and we also know that he was the Apple CEO. Coming to his reputation, we have here he was known for his entrepreneurial skills. Also, we have here his foresight, and we have here created and supported products. Now we have passed by the four characters. As you can see, we have here Amancio Ortega, Mohamed Abdellatif Jamil, Li Ka-shing, and Steve Jobs. Now we go back to our vocabulary. Now, actually, I'm going to give you time to just search for the vocabulary again. We have here the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words that we mentioned before, and I am sure that you passed by them while we were reading. So I'm going to give you more time because we have here the exercise on page number 21. We have here to complete each sentence with a word from the box. So I want you to concentrate, to read the sentences and to fill in the blanks correctly. So this is going to be your homework for the next lesson, inshallah. Now for pair work, you have a role play. Now role play with a partner. Choose a person from one of the influential people's stories. You play this person and your partner plays a reporter who interviews you, then switch roles. So I am sure that you know many influential people and you admire some of them, so you can just role play and just pretend that you are this personality, and you can have like an interview with a colleague or a classmate, and you can just switch the roles. So this is an interesting exercise just to recall the great achievements of the people around us. So our outline for the day, we defined vocabulary by the meaning, of course, so we're going to go back to that. We have here, we discussed the ability to succeed. Then we recalled famous figures, read short biographies, and we did search for facts and summarized each personality. Now this is our lesson for the day, the listen and discuss lesson of Unit 2. We are going to follow, inshallah, in the next lesson, so be prepared and have a nice day.